Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. So the conversation around where we all work has, it's definitely moved past that simple return to office debate.
Oh, absolutely. We're in a new strategic landscape now.
Exactly. The question isn't if we offer flexibility anymore, it's how we structure it to drive a measurable business ROI. So our mission in this deep dive is really to analyze these comprehensive workplace models, remote, hybrid, the whole thing.
To define an ROI that goes way beyond just, saving on the monthly lease.
Precisely. And we're not just talking theory here. This is the new norm. I mean, we've got tracking from February 2025 that says 52% of U.S. employees in jobs that can be done remotely are hybrid.
52%.
And another 27% are fully remote. So if you're listening, you are probably managing teams where, roughly 3/4 of your talent is not tied to a fixed corporate desk?
That is the operational reality we have to optimize for.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why leaders just can't view flexibility as a simple benefit anymore. Or worse, as just some grudging cost center.
It's an operational model.
It has to be treated as a practical lever, a core operational model. The real strategic challenge is figuring out how to align this new flexible model to your specific culture, your business demands, and then, this is the critical part, how you measure the results.
To make sure it's actually working.
And make sure that flexibility genuinely raises productivity and, benefits your bottom line. To do that, we have to start by framing the ROI properly.
Okay.
Our sources really emphasize that you need to measure success across three big comparable pillars: costs, productivity, and what they call people outcomes.
Right.
And you have to assess all three over a short, repeatable window like a quarter to really understand the strategic trade-off you're making.
Okay, so let's unpack that first pillar then. Costs. For decades, the ROI on real estate was, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Fixed office spend.
Rent, utilities, cleaning, security.
All very high when you had full occupancy 5 days a week. Simple math.
But the game just fundamentally changes when you shift to a hybrid model. The calculation moves from how much is the lease to something more like how efficient is our entire network.
So the fixed costs might drop.
They might, yeah. You can downsize the facility, maybe start using utilization analytics and hot desking, but you instantly introduce a whole bunch of new variable costs.
Right, so you're not really eliminating spending, you're shifting it.
You're shifting it, exactly.
You're moving money over to, robust IT support, tech licenses for all these new collaboration platforms.
Home office stipends for ergonomic gear, reliable internet.
We're essentially moving the corporate firewall, and we have to pay to maintain that security and that efficiency wherever people are.
You've hit on it. And the money's often spent in a totally different way. You need a big investment in strong identity controls, like single sign-on, SSO, and secure connections, like a VPN.
Because the risk is now everywhere.
It's distributed across every single employee's home network. It becomes an investment in risk mitigation, not just real estate.
Let's talk about the difference between those direct line items and the more subtle indirect costs. Because the sources stress that hidden expenses, like employee downtime or constant context switching.
Slower onboarding times.
Right. And just the friction of change management, those things can quietly just destroy any ROI gains you thought you had. How do companies even start to quantify that kind of invisible friction?
Well, that's the hard part, isn't it? These are the costs of inefficiency, the friction between all your systems.
Okay.
If your hybrid model requires a new process or, say, an extra layer of approval, that's friction. And we're seeing leaders tackle this by really focusing on quantifying the time that's lost.
So, for example?
For example, tracking how long it takes to onboard a new hire, depending on their location, or measuring how often a highly technical worker gets pulled into an unscheduled meeting.
Ah, okay.
If your model introduces too much of that friction, the productivity gains you were hoping for they vanish. And the cost of managing the model itself goes up dramatically.
That shift in spending and then the complexity of these indirect costs, it makes the whole ROI equation feel a lot more complex.
It is.
But that complexity is exactly why we have to pivot our focus away from inputs like spending and more toward the measurable outputs.
Which brings us neatly to the second pillar, productivity.
Right. The research is pretty clear that we have to be measuring objective outcomes, not just hours logged on a screen.
Absolutely. We should be tracking highly specific operational metrics, things that give us an objective view of output quality, regardless of where someone is sitting.
So things like,
think about metrics like cycle time, defect rates, customer time to value. The goal is to ensure you have reliable, high-speed collaboration that actually leads to the team moving faster and getting better results for the customer.
And to make that measurement practical, I think the article suggests using leading indicators, right? The things that happen before you get to the final product.
Exactly. We're talking about metrics like pull requests merged per week. That's a great measure of engineering throughput.
Or, say, customer tickets closed for support team.
Yes. But critically, those indicators have to be tied directly back to things like the customer's net promoter score, your NPS, and overall business metrics.
You need proof that all that throughput is actually creating real-world value.
You do.
Yeah.
And if we look deeper at what drives that high throughput, we find that the foundation isn't location at all. It's trust.
Okay, this is the core insight from the source material, they call it. Cooperation over co-location.
That's it. When employees trust their coworkers to cooperate and deliver reliable work, that trust acts as this profound multiplier on everything else.
That sounds intuitive, sure, but can you put a number on it? What's the real quantifiable impact of that trust?
The data point is, it is truly staggering. Employees who trust their peers to execute and deliver are 8.2 times more likely to give extra effort.
8.2 times. Wow.
Think about that. That discretionary effort means fewer handoffs, faster approvals, a dramatic cut in rework. You're getting more high-quality output without just demanding longer hours. It fundamentally changes the productivity equation.
That is a powerful insight, and it implies that for hybrid to work, the success really rests on the shoulders of middle management.
It does.
They're the ones who have to translate that high trust into business outcomes, but they need the right tools to manage outputs in these mixed teams, not just monitor screens.
Precisely. And the research points to a really high reported adoption rate, something like 63% for project tools like Jira or Trello among managers in these hybrid setups.
So that lets them measure throughput.
Exactly. It lets them measure throughput, set priorities based on delivery speed, and coach their teams on execution, which is just essential when your team is distributed. If they can't measure it objectively, they just revert to checking for visible activity, green dots on Slack.
And that kills trust.
Instantly. But even those productivity gains, the ones driven by flexibility and trust, they can erode really quickly if we aren't careful about these hidden time costs.
Yeah, we've seen reports that those gains can disappear fast.
Yeah.
What specific data do we have on, say, the burnout rate or the extra hours people are logging?
We've got pretty concrete data showing that flexibility is often paid for with personal time. 76% of remote workers reported checking messages or working late in a typical week.
76%.
And 26% say they just work longer now than they did before the shift began. That is a major hidden drain on your ROI, where flexibility stops being a productive benefit and just becomes unpaid overtime.
Productivity hiding is burnout. That's a powerful phrase. It means a lot of companies might be measuring the wrong thing entirely if they only look at output and ignore the well-being of their people. So that raises the big question. How do we protect focus and balance while still keeping that flexibility?
The source offers 3 pretty practical guardrails that leaders really need to enforce to combat that burnout creep. First, set anchor days.
Anchor days.
Days for complex in-person collaboration. These are designed for connection, for brainstorming, for social bonding.
Okay. And the second?
Second, you have to establish protected focus days for deep, heads-down work. This means actually enforcing asynchronous updates and having dedicated, scheduled, no meeting blocks to cut down on that context switching.
That sounds great in theory, but doesn't setting protected focus days kind of conflict with the need for anchor days? How do you manage that tension without just creating 2 really packed, chaotic days and 3 silent ones?
Yeah, that's a good question. The key is the third guardrail. Standardizing your tools and dashboards and then rigorously communicating the expectations.
So managers have to trust the data.
Managers need to trust the data coming from those project tracking tools we talked about. If they can trust the system to spot performance trends and health signals, they don't need to resort to micromanaging visible activity.
Got it. The guardrails define when collaboration happens, and the tools prove the work is getting done. Which transitions us nicely into our third pillar, people outcomes. This is where we look at retention, engagement, the long-term health of the workforce, the human capital side of ROI.
Right. And flexibility expands the talent pool, which is a massive win for your hiring reach.
But that benefit comes with some pretty complex trade-offs. Fully distributed teams often report high engagement, which is great, but they also face increased risks of stress and loneliness.
Especially if that social connection isn't deliberately built into the model.
So leaders have to set really clear boundaries for off-hours communication and make sure that support is visible and, stigma-free to prevent burnout from becoming chronic.
Yeah, and the talent dynamics get even more complex. While flexibility expands your talent pool and can speed up hiring, it can also raise your churn rates.
Because it's easier to leave.
It's easier. If candidates can explore new roles without needing to physically relocate, leaving your company becomes a lot simpler, especially if they never really bonded with the culture or their teammates.
Which is why companies absolutely have to be measuring offer acceptance rates and, maybe more importantly, 90-day retention, specifically by the work model they're using.
That's the key. If your fully remote cohort is churning at a higher rate than your hybrid one, then your model is not delivering enough value to those employees. Simple as that.
We also have to talk about the really critical issue of equity and career progression. This isn't just a fairness issue. Proximity bias can actively destroy the ROI of a distributed team.
Because it favors whoever happens to be visible in the office.
And there's a very real risk of perceived inequity, right? Where senior staff maybe negotiate and get more flexibility, while the junior staff feel like they have to come in just to be noticed.
That bias is so corrosive to long-term trust and retention. The only solution is structured systems. Implementing transparent criteria for promotion, building mandatory structured development plans.
And specifically using something called cross-location sponsorship.
Yes.
For those who aren't familiar, what exactly does cross-location sponsorship entail?
It's basically formalized mentorship, where the senior sponsor and the junior person they're mentoring are intentionally separated geographically.
Ah, so it forces the issue.
It forces the issue. It ensures that career visibility and access to mentorship aren't dependent on whether you happen to sit next to the decision maker. It forces managers to engage with output and potential, not just physical presence. Fairness is a vital, quantifiable part of long-term ROI.
And finally, let's turn to forward-looking risk, specifically security and compliance, which really needs to be woven into the culture. When people are splitting time between the hardened corporate network and their home Wi-Fi, the entire security posture just changes drastically. We're forced to move from perimeter security, the old corporate firewall, to an identity-first defense strategy.
This shift is, it's mandatory. Home networks inherently increase your exposure points. You're dealing with shared devices, weak routers, external threats that used to be blocked at the front door.
So the key requirements are pretty clear.
Very clear. Mandated endpoint protection on all devices, strong identity controls through SSO, and guaranteed secure pathways, like a VPN, for any critical systems.
And this all requires policy consistency across the board. The sources really stress standardizing tools and having a central source of truth. They mention examples like DHL's Smart Connect.
A single place to publish policies, training, and status updates reliably. Yeah. If you make the secure way the easiest way, compliance improves dramatically.
And that's the strategic pivot, isn't it?
It is. When you standardize the approach, security becomes uniform and integrated. Compliance becomes an enabler, not a blocker.
So companies have to define these incident response protocols for remote work. Like what happens if a device is lost or someone connects to unsafe Wi-Fi?
And then they have to run regular tabletop exercises that specifically include these hybrid threats, testing employee response when they're outside that traditional firewall. It's all about managing risk-adjusted impact across the entire environment.
So to bring this all together, the big takeaway is that you have to treat flexibility not as some nice-to-have perk, but as a core operating model that drives your business efficiency.
And you have to commit to simple, repeatable guardrails. Meeting-like calendars, mandated async updates, protected focus time. The actionable steps for you this week should be assessing which jobs truly need co-location versus which can be asynchronous.
And then matching the job to the best model.
Match the job to the model. Run short, data-driven experiments by function to test out new norms. And use those weekly leading indicators we talked about, PRs merged, cycle times, to adjust those norms fast.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've covered costs, trust, churn, the strategic shift to identity-first defense. If we distill everything we've talked about down to a single theme, it's this. Make security a uniform part of your culture so compliance becomes an enabler, not a blocker.
Right.
So we should ask you, how can you use your improved identity-first security posture to actually empower rather than restrict your best talent? That really feels like the strategic pivot for the future of work.
A truly provocative thought to end on.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the strategic ROI of the future of work. We're grateful you tuned in to the SmartKeys podcast.
And if you found these insights valuable, please subscribe to the podcast for more strategic business insights. We publish new deep dives every single week, analyzing the sources that matter most.
And for a full, data-backed look at everything we discussed today, including the exact metrics and that strategic framework, we really encourage you to read the full article, Remote versus Office ROI, Analyzing Cost and Productivity Trade-Offs. You can find the link, as always, right there in the show notes.
Until next time, work smarter.